And with that, the final strains of the Rolling Stones' Monkey Man have echoed through my brain. That's a lot of times I use that song to get ready for the show. I don't know if you are familiar with that, but for some reason, it fires me up. And yeah, it just gets me going. It's just a snotty, in your face, dirty, gutter rock song. It's not punk rock, but it is a dirty, gutter rock song. One of the best Stones tracks, in my opinion, and highly underrated. And I don't like everything the Rolling Stones did. I like maybe 20% of their catalog. The rest of it I can kind of take or leave. And Mick Jagger, I could take or leave as an individual. Not a big fan. Keith Richards, I like. He's crazy. He's wild. He's authentic. Mick Jagger is a Satanist, dark Satanist. That said, that's my Rolling Stones connection for the morning. When I was a kid, one of my best friends in high school was a huge Rolling Stones fan. I used to listen to a lot of Stones. I didn't need a Rolling Stones album. Although I did own one Rolling Stones album at one time, and it was It's Only Rock and Roll. That was the only Rolling Stones record I ever owned. Everything else, I just go to my friend's house and we're getting this car. It was either Rolling Stones or Frank Zappa. Rolling Stones or Frank Zappa. That was it. That was his. Well, he had a lot of other records, but that was it. My good man Keith, my buddy Keith. I remember one time I bought him a Jimmy Smith record. Back at the Chicken Shack, Jimmy Smith, the Hammond B3 organ player. He loved that. And we had this one record by Chico Hamilton that we would play. It was really an amazing piece of music, and we would sing along to it, even though there were no words. We'd get a mic, we'd make our own words up. All right, what's happening, everybody? Good to see you. We had a massive show last night. Almost 4-hour extravaganza. Started off at around 7:45 Central Standard Time, and I had 2 hours of pretty much undiluted astrological connections around JFK, Inauguration Day, the Trump chart with all the oppositions. I mean, that 2 hours alone, I think, was really instructive. And I didn't plan on going 2 hours alone at the beginning of the show, which is fine. I mean, 2 hours for me is I can do it. And then just as I was getting ready to kind of, hang it up after 2 hours, David Palmer, aka the Leo King, dropped in, and we were there for almost another 2 hours jamming on all things astrological and then some. So if you didn't see last night's show, it's highly recommended. And these are. We had Friday with Jordan Fultz, and don't sleep on that Jordan Fultz show. I think, I said this to Jordan in an email, that was one of the best interviews I've ever done with anybody. Period. End of story. With Jordan, it's a tremendous. I mean, look, when you have really good material, like if you're a cook, and you are working with really great materials, like it's much easier to make a really great meal. If your foundational ingredients are really great, it's much easier. So when you have somebody like Jordan, that's like starting with just really fantastic ingredients, and then and you can fuck it up, right? You can fuck something up like that, but even if you fuck it up, it's still going to taste relatively okay. So I thought that interview was tremendous. And the thing I really liked about the Jordan Fultz interview was that, yes, I was interviewing him, but he has this ability to be an igniter and a catalyst. So it felt like we were just hitting and hitting and hitting. Like he would say something, it would hit something with me, and I'd say something, hit something with him. It was great. And then last night with David was a very different kind of animal in a lot of ways, because, David's a big personality, and he has a lot of energy. So it's kind of like, two comets sort of flying, side by side in space. And so that was a really interesting interview as well. And I really liked David. And it was great to see him, bust out his astrology last night, and then we could, collaborate on a couple of things. So hopefully I'll be over on High Vibe TV and so, bring my little pot of stew over there. And it's good. I mean, I feel like we're in this time now where we have to make alliances, right? I mean, I talk about reimagining the individual. And this is what I've been saying for, the last, 6 months or so. Reimagining the individual, because in order for us to get through this time, we cannot be individuals anymore, not in the strict sense of the word. No man is an island. I know it's a cliche, but it's true. So, we have to begin to build these bridges across the archipelago of our lives and our professions with other people. And we're not going to get through it if we don't. And there's always going to be some level of self-interest involved. I mean, that's just the way humans are, right? But as long as we match our level of self-interest with an equal level of interest in working together to build a foundation for something new, then I think we're in a much better place, and we have the opportunity to actually do something that could be meaningful, absolutely meaningful. Okay, let's see who we have here. We got Misty Minor Mountaintops, Led Zeppelin. Now, if I had to pick one band over the other, it'd be Led Zeppelin over the Rolling Stones. Across the entire canon of their material, it'd be Led Zeppelin, and what is it? Stones, right? Whatever. Led Zeppelin, Stones. And I've never owned a Led Zeppelin record in high school either. Why? Because all my friends fucking owned Led Zeppelin records, and I never needed to own one. I just go to their house. Let's listen to this. It's going to be on. Okay. So those were two bands where I just okay, well, you guys have the records. You're playing them all the time, so I really don't need to get those records now, do I? So I was able to get other stuff. All right, let's see what we got here. Ian Barb, what's going on? Ian, J, and P Love. Ms. Joe Mama's in the house. What's going on, Joe? Teresa Blackburn, nice to see you. There's Lils Scrubbies. Hey, Scrubbies, good to see you. Nice to be here. Let's see. Mark Matheny, what's going on, Mark? How are you doing back there? I heard they're going after Governor DeWine, W-H-I-N-E. See what happens with that. Mercola data analysis by Cleveland Clinic found patients who supplement melatonin had a 29% lower risk of testing positive. Blacks taking melatonin were 52% less likely to test positive. That's interesting. Seems like when you look at the testing, right? The testing that they use. The PCR test, polymerase chain reaction test, which is really not a very reliable test at all. It was never meant to test for this one specific thing. They keep recycling, cycle, and then they'll find some shit in your DNA, and you're positive, right? So it seems as though the so-called African-American Black community tends to test positive more than the so-called Caucasian community, right? And not sure what's going on in the basement of the DNA there, but that's what it appears to be. So that's an interesting development about melatonin. I wonder if they could. I wonder. Well, it's interesting because of the melanin factor, right? Melanin with melatonin. As we get older, we create or secrete less of it. So we have to supplement that in order to get our cycles back together again, and be able to sleep. So the melanin factor, the melanin rate in so-called Blacks, African Americans is much higher. It's much higher. So I guess the melatonin would amplify that, supposedly. I wonder if they could market a strictly Black version of melatonin, so they could be more popular with them. I'm being serious. I'm really thinking about this from a free market standpoint. Oh my God, I did not expect Idaho to cave. Oh, what's going on with Idaho? Yeah, boy. Idaho's fallen under the control of the face diaper mandate. People are still resisting. This is it. Hey, Judy, nice to see you. Goat's Head Soup. I think the best Stones record, and I have listened to them, by the way, just not own the albums. I think the best Stones record by far is Exile on Main Street. I think that's the one. That is the one. That's the one they recorded in France as they were tax bandits. There's Robbie Chope. What's going on, Rob? Susan Cano. Cano. It's a rune, by the way. Dana Cruz, Victoria V. Natasha, not a Stones fan at all. Craig Corporon. Nice transition from last night's cast. Good morning, all. Hey, what's going on? It was Chatlandia was packed, wasn't it? It was like one of these ships where people are trying to get off of, like, I don't know, Vietnam or someplace like that. It's Cuba. Everybody's scrambling on the ship, right, to get on there. Led Zeppelin, Immigrant Song. Oh man, that is one of the best. Great. I love Immigrant Song. Immigrant Song and Dancing Days. Dancing Days is, whenever I hear Dancing Days, it awakens the pagan within me. Let's see, who else do we have here? Jordan's was so full of greatness. I know, right? Yeah, for sure. He has that one line that really sticks out. We didn't fight fascism in World War II. We fought Hitler. I thought, man, that is a home run right there. Let's see, who else do we have here? Customer queue. If everyone is asymptomatic, who the fuck cares? Exactly. Apparently, healthy people no longer exist. We don't hear about anymore. We don't hear about cancer anymore, do we? We don't hear about cancer. Oh, so and so is cancer. I mean, that doesn't mean that cancer hasn't gone away, but it really gets you to think about cancer and the diagnosis of cancer, what cancer really is. And we've had this discussion before. It's a number of factors, primarily fungal. But no, there's no more. Okay, what about cases of the flu? Oh, they're way down. We're way down. Everything is COVID, corona. We've tried to go after our governor in Arkansas through the judicial, the super liberal judge throughout the complaints. Now Hutchinson is telling us not to gather for Thanksgiving. You got a traitor. You got a communist traitor. These people have all been put into place. I tell you where the election fraud really went down in a huge way was 2018, which allowed a lot of this shit to happen. Right. And a lot of people, myself included, took some shots at Millie Weaver with, some of the stuff that she did with Tor. Not because I don't think that there's a there there. There was definitely a there there. It was just kind of how everything was assembled. But the one thing that Millie Weaver did do, and I think she was actually working with Tor, or Tory, or how I can never reconcile how to say her name, is that they uncovered voter fraud in Kentucky, big time voter fraud, which allowed their, what's his name, Andy Beshear, to be elected. And these governors are bad news. Gretchen Whitmer came in 2018, and I think a lot of the, the daughters of Macbeth, right, the daughters of Lear's daughters, all, I think, got elected in 2018. Dana Nestle is a full-blown communist, hardcore commie. Jocelyn Benson looks the part of an all-American girl, an athlete, but, she was groomed by the Pilgrim Society and Southern Poverty Law Center. So all these people were put in place. And 2018 was huge, right? And we barely dodged a bullet here in Texas with staving off Beto. People don't realize how close that election was. Beto was like 2% away from defeating Ted Cruz. And it's important to keep in mind that Joe Biden's campaign manager was Beto's campaign manager, and she came very close to getting Beto elected. And it was like, that is a big deal. But not only that, but, that's when Ocasio-Cortez comes in. She comes in 2018, and there were a whole group of candidates that went through that vector, right? That window. You had these ex-CIA agents now showing up in Congress. So they really loaded. They loaded up in 2018, and they loaded up in 2018 for 2020. And that's when the voter fraud really needed to be thoroughly exposed. And of course, nothing was happening then because it wasn't affecting the president. And not only that, but there wasn't such an egregious excess in terms of the voting like it is now. I'm going to talk about that today. I'm going to talk about what happened with Sidney Powell and try to sort through that whole jungle. Let's see, Good Life 3. Hey, Steve, what's going on? I will catch up with you a little bit later this morning, Steve, after I get back from the chiropractor. Fox Burrows, good to see you. Athlete's foot is also systemically racist affliction. Well, it's you know what it is. It's also it's not just a systemically racist, but it is an attack on individuality. What if you're not an athlete and you have athlete's foot? What if you're an intellectual and you have athlete's foot? Or what if you're a I don't know, not observant athlete, you get athlete's foot? I mean, there should be another name for athlete's foot. I mean, come on, let's think about it. Why athletes? Are they so fucking special that they get a disease named after them or disorder named after them? I don't see Warehouseman's elbow or his tennis elbow, athlete's foot, right? Okay, here we go. Tennis elbow is I didn't see that. That's so funny. I was riffing on tennis elbow, and I just saw your comments here. You and I are in the same wavelength. Let's see what else. What did Donka say? New Mexico governor closing grocery stores. They're on it, man. This is it. They want to bring this country and the people in this country to their fucking knees. Okay. They want to take your businesses. They want to take your jobs. They want to take your family. They want to take your traditions. They want to take your pastimes. They want to take your food. Pretty soon, they will take your power and they will take your money, and you will be left with nothing. Nothing. And the only recourse you'll have is to get on your knees and crawl and beg to have everything that's associated with the Great Reset. This is what's happening. This is what's happening. Now, I'm going to say this. I'm going to say it again. All right, I'm going to say it again. This thing could end today. It could end today, and all Trump has to do is rescind the medical emergency that he put into place, which allowed the states to do whatever the fuck they wanted. All right, that's it. It could end today. That's all he would have to do. He's still president, but he's still going along with this thing. And not only that, but the CDC has come out and said, "Well, you can't get together for Thanksgiving. That's just too risky." And Mike Pence has been put back in charge of the Corona task force. Like, really? Do we really need Mike Pence there? Because he did such a bang-up fucking job before. Mike Pence, I tell you, man. Not one of my favorite people. Not one of my favorite people. And I've been getting a heavy dose of Steve Bannon. And Bannon needs to drop this coronavirus, the Chinese weaponized flu. He needs to drop it because he's been using that as this basis to demonize China. Like, we're the ones. We're the ones that are suffering because China released this virus into our system. So therefore, it is an act of aggression. Therefore, we are ready for war with China. Look, that could be true. We've seen the trail. We've seen what happened. Charles Lieber, who nobody talks about, by the way. We've talked about him. I talked about Charles Lieber like 3 weeks into this fucking Corona thing. I talked about him. It's like, this is the guy right here. Right here. Why? Because he had frequent flyer miles to Wuhan. He was on the Chinese payroll. He helped develop that level 5 lab in Wuhan. That was his thing. Okay, he did it. Then you have the people up in Canada, right? I think it was at is it Manitoba in Canada, where they literally kicked out these Chinese scientists who were taking material out of that laboratory and taking it to China. Then you have what's going on in North Carolina, right? So the hotspots here are North Carolina, the Research Triangle, Charles Lieber, the head of virology and a so-called expert in nanotechnology. And then you have Canada. These are the 3 contact points, and it all winds up in Wuhan. So there is a there, okay? There's a there, but what they did is they faked us out. It was a big fake. We watched a big fake. And, when I was watching this thing, trying to figure out what the fuck was going on, and you'd be watching people just drop. I'm like, what's happening here? There was one incident where I started to look at this thing and go, wow, there's something strangely amiss. And it was somebody in New York City, and it was this Chinese guy, and he dropped. But then he got up and started to look around like there's something weird here. And then we had all the people on the cruise ships. Like, what the fuck is up with that? What is up with the cruise ships? Well, here's what I think. I think the cruise ships had 5G installed. And there are a lot of people who, like last year when I got sick, I was okay before I left. I was not okay when I got to California. What happened in the interim? What was going on in the airport, and more importantly, what was going on in the plane? Now, Southwest has Wi-Fi on their plane. Did Southwest reconfigure their Wi-Fi to be 5G? Are they hooked up to a 5G signal inside the plane? Not, they can't get 5G, from the plane. They literally have to go over a route with these MIMOs, and I don't think MIMOs have a very high altitude reach. But inside the plane, it would be a 5G system. And I just remember a couple of days after hitting California, I was just not right at all. And it took me about 3 weeks to really recover from that. And that was November of last year. So there seems to be something with travel, and there clearly seems to be something with the cruise ships. I do think that the people in the cruise ships were probably not doing well. Now, here's the other thing with the cruise ship industry. Again, I'm just following the money. Donald Trump has friends inside the cruise ship industry. He does. They all mostly run out of Florida. Mickey Aronson, who is, I think at one point in time was the owner of the Miami Heat. Maybe he still is, basketball team. He's a cruise ship guy. I think he's a friend of Trump's. Who got a lot of the PPP money? The cruise liners, because they took a hit, right? So, what was going on with the cruise liners prior to that? What was their business like? Were they doing a ton of business? Were they on the skids? The whole PPP thing is another complete scandal that nobody's paying attention to. The allocation of that money, where it went, who got it, another massive, and I'm telling you, just massive theft, massive transference of wealth, probably at the same level, if not more, than the 2008, 2009, and that was huge. The economy essentially ended in 2008, 2009. So, the cheese stinks. Cheese stinks. The cheese stinks in Denmark. And Trump could end it. He could end it today. He said it's over. But you have to go back and you have to listen to what Steve Pieczenik says. And Steve Pieczenik doesn't talk out of his ass unless he's talking about watermark ballots. Like, where's that now? Where are the watermark ballots now? I was like a little dubious about that stuff. It's like, I don't know. Where are you going to get these ballots? Where, because these are theoretically federal ballots. Because when I voted here, again, it's the first time I voted for a major election. I voted last year for for the fluoride campaign. It was the first time I voted since 1980. So I voted in this election, and we had two separate ballots. We had a local ballot, and we had a state and federal ballot. So, the state and the federal ballot, they were Texas ballots, right? It was like, they weren't like, oh, here's a federal ballot, here's a state ballot, and then here's a local ballot. There weren't three ballots. There were two. So, was there a watermark on those ballots? I don't know. I don't think so. I think the watermark is very hard to prove at this point. And it's a story that just kind of, evaporated. And that was the Steve Pieczenik thing. He brought that up. And I think you have to be careful, really careful with Steve Pieczenik. I mean, this is a guy who does not really have a very fond feelings with the Constitution. And remember, Steve Pieczenik has said that they are going to let the coast burn. Those were his words. They're going to let the coast burn, especially California, Oregon, and Washington. Well, why? Well, they want to move essentially all that manufacturing and the Silicon Valley mindset to, guess where? The middle of the country, Texas being the primary recipient of it. You think Joe Rogan moving from California to Texas had anything to do with, the quality of life and the shitty experience he was having in LA? Look, if Joe Rogan wanted to have a better quality of life, all he needed to do is move to Huntington Beach like David. I'll show you some video from Huntington Beach, by the way. That's all he needed to do. He didn't need to move to fucking Texas, although he get a much better tax break here in Texas. That's for damn sure. But, we've talked about it before. Rogan is moving. Rogan moved here. Elon Musk is here. Apple's here. Google's here. Now, guess what? We're going to have a new aeronautics business open in Kerrville. We've got another huge business opening here in Texas as well, not far from Kerrville. So there's a major push. Now, Steve Pieczenik has said this, that the middle of the country is going to be where the power is. That's where the power is going to concentrate. And they're going to let the coast burn. Those are his words. That includes Florida, by the way, although if Roger Stone, Donald Trump, Scott Israel, and everybody else that's connected to Florida has any say in it, Florida will not burn. Now, Steve Pieczenik did say the South as well. So Florida definitely qualifies as the South. But once you get past Orlando, you're basically dealing with, archipelagos, swampland, and the encroachment of the Atlantic Ocean. So anything kind of north of Orlando, you're going to have more of a sense of it actually being a part of something else and something different. So why is this important? Because we're witnessing the balkanization of the United States. This governor does this, this governor does that, this governor does this. New Mexico has become, for all intents and purposes, a penitentiary. Like stores are closed. I mean, it's fucking ridiculous. It is ridiculous. And meanwhile, the votes and the totals, if you really do the math on this thing, it looks like Trump overwhelmingly won. And I said that he had to win by a landslide. He really, 10% was not going to be enough of a win. I think Trump probably won at least by 25, 30% of the vote, maybe more. If everything was, I don't want to use the word static, but if everything was clean and you saw what really happened without, all these ballots rolling in at night, the Dominion software servers just flipping, you would see that there were states that were primarily blue in the 2016 election. They're red. I believe California went red. I believe New Mexico went red. Colorado, I don't know. Arizona, red. Nevada, red. You can forget Washington, Oregon. They're just going to be, fucked up. But I think that those states were I think Virginia was red. Obviously, Texas was red. Wisconsin was red. Michigan was red. Pennsylvania was red. I mean, all the key. I would not even be surprised if Illinois might have been red. Would not be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, Illinois was blue. Okay, so what does that really leave for Biden? What does it leave for Biden? I think Trump won North Carolina. I think he won South Carolina. I think he won Georgia. What it leaves is Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, Delaware, Connecticut, maybe, I don't know, Vermont, Rhode Island, okay, Ohio, he won. Washington, Oregon, I guess Hawaii went blue, who gives a fuck? So I think Biden may have won, if he was lucky, maybe 6 states. That means that 44 states voted for Trump in red. So that's massive. It's massive. Absolutely massive, which is why everything was so sloppy. And I'm going to get to Sidney Powell, because Sidney Powell had a strange series. There's some strange shit happened with Sidney Powell yesterday, so I'm going to try to get to that. And but really, truth be known, these states, they were red. Now, again, they were able to do what they wanted to do, right? They were able, now, here's where it blows my mind. I'm going to get back to Steve Pieczenik too. Here's where it blows my mind. It's like the federal government, even though the states have their own elections and have their own theoretical voting systems, like here in Texas, we passed on Dominion. Although Austin, of course, Austin has its own version of, electronic balloting, and I want to get Laura Presley on the show. Maybe I can get her on Friday. She'd be a very timely guest to have on the show. By the way, we're going to have Sherry Swiney on the show this Friday. And Sherry Swiney is the co-author of Jerry Markovitz and his book about schizophrenia, voices, dispossessed entities, and the archons. So that'll be a really good show. And if I can get Laura on, Laura actually fought voter fraud here in Texas. She fought voter fraud in Texas. And guess what? She won. And with Laura's case, what happened was it was the machines, and it was the USB sticks. And if I can get her on, she'll be a really good guest. Laura's very compelling. She's a firebrand. And what happened? I think this was 2018, or it might have been, it was 2016. And she was in a district where it was fairly conservative, and there were a lot of quote unquote Christians and churches. And her opponent came in from out of nowhere, and he was not even a resident of that district for very long. So he came in and got on the ballot very quickly. And everything poll wise suggested that Laura was going to win this thing hands down. And what happened was, just like what was going on with Trump, that the early totals were really, exit polls, early totals looking like Laura Presley. When you meet Laura, you understand why they didn't want her in office in Austin. So what happens is, all of a sudden, chaos, and Laura doesn't win. So somebody comes in, not from the area, represents a very, very different kind of political ideology. And then she finds out what went on. And it had to do with the actual machines. These are machines now that essentially take the data from the vote. They're in the precincts, and then they take those machines to a centralized place. And then those machines are then brought in, and then the vote is tabulated. But there are back doors, and the ability to use a fucking USB. And what happened was that there was a USB that was inserted into the machines that corrupted the machines. So then there was the ability to go back in and then uncorrupt or fix the problem. And when they fixed the problem, guess what happened? The vote totals changed. So Laura took this thing to court, just like they're doing now. And she went to the first court in Austin. They threw her ass out. They said, you got no case. They levied her with a significant fine and court fees. So that, like, that'll teach you. You'll learn your lesson now. Just go away before it gets worse. This is a woman who is dauntless. And she kept going, and she went to the next level, next court level. Guess what? She lost again. Now, this is over a period of time. You don't do these cases within a period of months. Like, we're talking about 6 months, a year, year and a half. So by this time, this guy's firmly in office. Like, he's not going anywhere. So then she loses that case. Guess what happens? More fines, more legal fees because she has to hire these lawyers to bail her out, and more reprimand from the judge. So she's taken on 2 L's in a row. She's got one more level left, and it's the Texas State Supreme Court. So she's thinking, should I do it? Should I do it? I've got 2 losses. If I lose this one, I'm really done. The fines will be so egregious that, everything I do moving forward will basically be to pay these fines and pay the legal fees. It was a real gambit on her part. So she went to the Texas State Supreme Court, the final sort of threshold for her to make her case, to make her stand. And guess what? She won. She won, and they proved that there was indeed malfeasance. They did prove that there was voter fraud. So the good news is that all of her fines got wiped out. Her legal fees, she's still paying off. However, she was not able to take on the election, have a recall, anything associated with that. But it did give her the basic framework and understanding about how elections are stolen with a particular system. So that's become her work. And she's been involved here in Fredericksburg dealing with the bullshit that happened with us on the fluoride campaign, or the anti-fluoride campaign. And, currently I'm not a part of the suit, but 2 people here in town are Jeanette, whom you probably have seen somewhere along the way on some of the shows that I did, she is a claimant in the suit. They're still taking money for that. I actually helped her raise $500 the other day. Her and this gal Angela, who are part of the Tea Party here, they went through the same bullshit they went through on this election that they went through the Florida election. The same clown who was the election judge pulled the same stupid fucking bullshit. And what was amazing about that election just recently is that they're on the phone with the Attorney General. Like, they're talking to the Attorney General's office, and the Attorney General, or the Attorney Secretary, one of the 2, they're on the phone, like they're talking, and they're saying, well, they can't do that. You have to be able to go in and be an observer to the voting. Now, Laura and Angela were not allowed in because I'm sorry, Jeanette and Angela were not allowed in because Jeanette was part of a suit. Well, you're a litigant, so that's bullshit. Doesn't matter if you're a litigant or not. They were just targeting her, and they didn't like Angela because Angela knew what the fuck she was doing. So what happened was they eventually allowed some observers in that they could push around. And it's like, stay 8 feet away, and just, the same shenanigans, the same hijinks that they pulled on us during the fluoride vote. And so they would get on the phone and they would talk to, and they would get actual emails from the Secretary of State, and they bring it down there to show these people at the county polling place where they were counting the votes. And the guy who was the election judge, they said, well, that's an interpretation, and I don't agree with that interpretation. Do you see where this thing has gone? The social contract has been completely and utterly out of smash. There's no chain of authority. There's no chain of command. There's no hierarchy. All you have is these little banana republics everywhere now. And some power hungry, power tripping, minor official who probably gets kickbacks somewhere along the way, basically says, I don't have to do that. And because of what's happened, And because of the decoupling of the states from the federal government, this thing is rampant now. This is what's happened. We are looking at the balkanization of the states. And that's why Trump has not said, okay, we're ending this thing. The medical emergency is over. Everybody now answers to the Fed. It's not doing that. He's not doing that. Well, the answer is why? It's because, and I've talked about this before, the United States as we know it is over. It is over. And it ended on 3/11, which is interesting because guess what? The election was held on 11/3, right? So we have COVID, which is really the new 9/11. And then we have the election, which is the new COVID 9/11, right? So we're dealing with a 9/11 moment here. This is exactly, so we have the mirrors, right? 3/11 and 11/3. Let's see, where are we in terms of never trust a CIA whistleblower who worked their entire life for the CIA. I never, these CIA whistleblowers, I mean, Robert David Steele, all these people, whatever. I don't listen to them at all. Why? It's like, oh, gee, you got out. Good for you. Good for you. You got out. If they wanted to, snuff them easily. There's hierarchy in secret societies, just not for us. Absolutely. That's a whole different chain of command. And thanks for bringing that up, Steve. You're absolutely correct. Let's see what else we have. I'm fine here now. Okay, well, I hope you're fine here now. Stay fine. Are you wearing a mask? Looks like you're wearing a mask. You don't have to wear a mask in Chatlandia. You can take your mask off. Yes, company man to the bone, but a big-time Trump supporter. Just nice to hear something other than trust the plan. Let's see. Pam Jerome hi, Pam. Got a lot of new people here. Watching from Taiwan. Right on, man. Welcome. Welcome to the show. How is it a former three-letter agent so spills the beans, still walks the earth? Yeah, it doesn't happen. It's like the mob. You never leave the mob. A gang, you're always in a gang. You're always in a gang. If you try to leave the gang, you're always in a gang. You sign a pact. You sign an oath. You absolutely sign a pact and an oath. Let's see. I don't trust Rudy Giuliani at all. I don't trust Rudy Giuliani at all. The only thing that I think Rudy Giuliani has in his favor is that maybe he's suffering from massive 9/11 guilt. And maybe this is why he's been, sweating black dye from his pores. That whole thing was weird. No, I don't trust him. I don't trust him. He cock blocked what was going on with 9/11. He knows exactly what happened with 9/11. The only thing that I can say for Giuliani is that maybe this is his kind of Roman Catholic redemptive moment. Maybe that's it. That's the only thing I will give him. And that's about it. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, so CS says 9/11. Yep. Hello, Cy Andres. Nice to see you. Giuliani equals mob boss. Giuliani was a DA in New York City, and he cut his teeth on prosecuting the mob. That was the mob that had a lot of pull over New York City. I believe that Giuliani was essentially given the keys to bust that mob cartel by another mob. Okay, the other mob didn't want any competition. Wrap your head around that. What's going on, Ralph? Stay masses, brother. Good to see you. Let's see. Ani says the three-letter agencies are like Roach Motel. Roaches check in, but they don't check out. I would say that's a very good analogy, Ani. State Jones in the house. What's going on, my man? Paulette Hanson, federal government always gave states authority over voting, though it carved out 18-year vote, 30-day residence. Okay. I don't think they should give states. Here's what I think they should do. I think they should have, if the states have a state election, then they could do it. The federal election years, every 4 years, that doesn't work. Sorry. One size fits all there. If you want to, hi Nancy, if you want to play that game. Let's see. I had some faith in Sidney Powell. Now she's being sidelined. It's all a fucking show. Let's talk about Sidney Powell for a moment. So I got off the show last night with David, and actually it was before I went on the show last night. And I'd seen that Sidney Powell had basically been put on the sideline, as Uncle Glenn said. So I thought, and I wasn't sure I wanted to talk about that during the show because I have to think about, topics. And I was actually going to look at Sidney Powell's chart last night, and I decided to put that on hold for obvious reasons. So this is a very interesting development, very interesting development. And I was listening, and I do not, these guys that are like the mainstays of Fox, I do not like them, even though they, claim to be patriots and they say all the right things, like Mark Levin. I don't like that guy. Anybody who buys in to the 9/11 narrative, as it were, you cannot trust. That is your litmus test. I'm telling you that right now. If they buy into that narrative, you cannot trust them. So Mark Levin had Kayleigh McEnany on. Now, Kayleigh McEnany will be replacing Sidney Powell as one of the spokespeople for this thing. And it's interesting because what Sidney Powell was talking about, she was talking about, the Kraken, which is apparently not just this mythical beast, but is the actual code/server used by the CIA. Okay. And, there's this whole story with getting the servers from Germany, which I do believe happened, although Sidney Powell was very strange when she said, "We've got them. We just don't know who has them." I mean, why would you even say that? I mean, she said that in a number of tweets, and she was ubiquitous. She was everywhere. She was on Glenn Beck. She was, and she was part of the team. She was part of the team. Trump had named a number of people who were on that team. Oh, there's a masked person right there, walking right by my house. Jesus. Why don't you just wear a fucking hazmat suit? And there's a tweet that says, "Oh, yes, proud to have these people," and Sidney Powell's in there. And now she's not in there. So what is happening? What is happening with Sidney Powell? There's really only three potential scenarios. Number one, she was getting too close to the third rail with the servers, the CIA, the intelligence agencies. And she was saying, we're going to take down the whole fucking thing. Do you think Trump, he may want to take down the whole fucking thing, but do you think he wants people to know that? Number one. And number two, there are a lot of people now, and I think it's 20 senators now? 20 of the Republican senators just are not into Trump. They want him out. They're questioning his ability to function as president. So, is Sidney Powell somebody who's stoking animosity and fires? Well, good. She should be. But I think that there is an investment in the Central Intelligence Agency and the alphabet agencies. And Sidney Powell was bringing a flamethrower to these things. So that's number one. And I don't think, maybe Trump is playing a long game. I think there's some level of appeasement. And some other people will say, well, now she'll get to go out and, work the cases for the people. She can pursue, criminal charges or whatever, right? But Sidney Powell, I guarantee you, you will not be seeing Sidney Powell on much alternative TV. Won't be there. Won't be there. People will drop her like a fly, right? They'll just drop her. She'll be yesterday's news. She won't be on Newsmax. She won't be on OAN. She won't be on Glenn Beck. I'd be very surprised. She won't be on Rush Limbaugh. Now that she doesn't have any kind of standing with the Trump administration, when she's a free agent, she'll be moved back into that, sort of fold. Not a lot of people knew about Sidney Powell, before the Michael Flynn stuff, and only really until Flynn had to go through all this bullshit with this judge that people knew that Sidney. By the way, Michael Flynn has not been pardoned by Trump. Neither Michael Flynn nor Roger Stone have been pardoned by Trump. And what would be the harm in that? Now, apparently, there's some big stuff going on with Flynn over the next couple of weeks, and since Sidney Powell is still representing him, there could be a conflict of interest on that front. So some people have mentioned that. And so it's either one of three things. Number one, she got too close to the rail, the third rail, and she's out. That Giuliani wanted her out, convinced Trump to get her out. You know, he's got Dershowitz in his ear. That's the other snake in the grass that you don't hear about, but he's on the payroll. And then, of course, whoever this Jenna Ellis is, I mean, whatever. And then you've got the other people, Sicolo and what's his name, Boris Epstein. These are all other people. There's this one guy named Klein who is actually kind of interesting. You won't hear about him, but he's been filing suits through the Amistad Project, which comes through the St. Thomas More Society. And this Klein guy, I think his name is Richard Klein, he's legit. This is a legit guy. And he's got his own thing going on. So, you know, if Sidney Powell goes that route, she might wind up on something like Steve Bannon's show, although, you know, Steve Bannon is an interesting character. He doesn't like to piss off Trump, but at the same time, he's not afraid to call people out. He called out Mike Pence last week. Mike Pence was basically letting the CDC call the shots for the holiday protocols. Like, you know, why the fuck are you doing that, Mike? You know, why are you letting, you know, well, to me, it's obvious why he's letting him do that, because that's who Mike Pence is. Mike Pence is a company guy to the core. To the core. You know, when he came here to Texas and paid a little visit to our governor, Greg Abbott, and then spent a day of worship with Robert Jeffers, like shit changed in Texas really quickly. Really, really quickly. We had new definitions of enforcement for the mask and all this other stuff. And then we had the contact tracing contract be put in place and approved. I mean, it all happened very, very quickly once Mike Pence showed up. If Mike Pence is coming to your state, beware, okay? Beware, red flag with Mike Pence. So Mike Pence, just, you know, he's just, okay, we'll let the CDC determine this. And Steve Bannon has to be careful, but he kind of called Mike Pence out. So now we've got the same old crew allowing people, like, why is Fauci not fucking sidelined? Why is he not allowed to speak? Why does he go on these TV shows now and say, well, you know, we might have to wear the mask even after we get vaccinated. And there's probably going to have to be more than one vaccine. And people don't understand this. I need to start doing the right thing. Wearing the mask helps. And, you know, we're going to get through this. But, you know, I don't think it's going to be a situation where we get the vaccine and then everything goes back to normal. You know, so I mean, why can't they put a gag order on this motherfucker? Okay, you can do stuff like that. You can slap people with gag orders if you want them to stop talking. It's simple, simple. They just did it to Sidney Powell, you know, and then she got banned from Twitter for 12 hours because she posted a link to that Miles Guo web channel. Anybody posts a link to that Miles Guo web channel on Twitter, automatic ban for 12 hours. Say what you want about teachers unions, but here they're protecting their members by blocking contact tracing. Good, good. Not all teachers unions are the same, by the way. You know, teachers unions again have different flavors. Even though there's a broad teachers union. But there are, again, because everything's become balkanized, there's no one-size-fits-all category. Yes, real science is never seen. Sick of it all. I'm working on some power kush. What else you got here? Walking your hands, hop twice before entering a building. Yeah. Mass NWO submission tampons. That is great, Nathaniel. I love that. What else do we have? Spy versus spy, Gemini, Gemini, right? There we go. Black and white, black and white. Let's see. Andy Bruto, bong hit of purple candy to go with Robert's show this morning. There you go. Wake and bake. All weapons in society are weaponized. Anyone who assists Trump will be persecuted. I did enjoy watching Jenna Ellis absolutely ream the NSM. Things need to be said. Good. Things need to be done. The time for saying is over. The time for doing is nigh. It is upon us. Okay, why don't we check out a few stories that I have here. Let me give you some good news. And really the great unreported stories that are happening now. And this is what's going on coast to coast, really. I mean, if we look at here, we have California. I'm sorry, this is California, Huntington Beach. You can tell it's Huntington Beach. And then here we have, this is interesting, no right turn. Huh. And then here, this is Buffalo. And I played you guys the Buffalo video last night. Let me give you a taste of the Buffalo video again. If you haven't, let me go back 1 second. If you haven't seen or heard this video, which I played on my show last night, get ready. It really is sort of the Boston Tea Party, I think, of what we're experiencing. And Western New York people have kind of been okay and being the outlaws of the mask protocols. But now Cuomo has decided that the tentacular reach of his COVID octopus must extend into the far western reaches of the state. So keep your eye on Krispy Kreme, Sheriff Krispy Kreme here, who does not even have an American accent. Sounds to me like he's an Aussie. Keep your eye on him. And keep your eye on the health frau. But watch what happens here. This is, and by the way, the quote of the year is going to be embedded in this video. Here we go. It's a gym.
You're on private property.
It's a gym.
We're asking to build your compassionate side. I know you're taxpayer. Our tax dollars guarantee your guys' paychecks. But some of these people actually work for their money, and they don't want to lose their livelihood.
So this is a guy who has a gym, like Achilles or Achilles gym, Attila's gym, Achilles gym, Achilles, whatever it is, in New Jersey. And they had to go through and retrofit their fucking gym and put plexiglass and all this shit that gyms in New York have had to do. He spent all this money, and now that they got an anonymous complaint. An anonymous complaint, and they're there to respond to the anonymous complaint. All right, so I set the stage. Let's go.
I've lost friends, I've lost family who've killed themselves. I've seen clients die because they've lost their livelihood.
I'm sorry to hear that.
I know you are, and I'm asking for you to guys have some compassion for the people that have lost everything.
We do have compassion for
We do have compassion. Listen to this.
people. Who
Okay, well, you need to go have compassion out in the parking lot.
Okay, you do have compassion out in the parking lot. I love this guy. And he's the guy, you got the good cop who's the owner of the gym, and he's trying to reason with these people. And then you got like super fucking bad cop.
This is private property.
This is
private property. This is private property. It's private property. Go get a warrant.
By the way, there's no such thing as private property. He's a little misinformed there. Even if they own the property and he owns the building, guess what? They have to pay property taxes. They have to. There is private. I don't even know if there's private ingress, but claiming it's private property is technically wrong. Okay, but let's just say for the sake of argument that these dopes don't know that, because apparently they don't. Here we go.
Listen, man, this is private property. They're not wanted here. So do your jobs.
Well, her job is.
Well, no, your
You
job
have
is
a
to
permit.
remove people that are not wanted
Now, Sheriff Krispy Kreme is chiming in.
You
here.
have a permit
We're
from the
wanted
health
here.
department.
They're not.
You have
She's
a health
hiding her
department
name
permit?
tag. She had her
I'm
name
not.
tag.
It's
There
right
we
here.
go.
It's marked
Hiding
there.
it.
You can see my
They're
name
just
tag.
doing their job.
There we go.
You should all be wearing masks. How come
I'm
none
not
of you
doing
have
anything
masks?
wrong.
Yeah, it's a simple job. You should all be wearing masks. You should all be wearing masks. You should go on a fucking diet and get to the gym.
Don't worry about my health. My health isn't your
You're
concern.
meant to be wearing a mask. It's a government.
Okay, well,
mandate.
then write me up.
It's the law.
Okay,
You're
then
meant to be
then
wearing-
then take me to jail.
It's not the law.
Then take me to jail.
Show me the law.
Show me the law,
Show me the law. Well, I think we gotta go, John.
You have to leave. You guys have to leave.
You guys need to
You have to leave.
Right now, you're trespassing without a warrant. You need to
civil
you need to leave. Trespassing.
We're not
Were you
trespassing.
invited?
Now, the warrant part is true. It is true. They do not have a warrant to be there, but they're bringing this, health frau in, like she's the warrant. It warrants their presence there because they have to make sure that everything is copacetic health-wise.
You're not on the
Trespassing.
property,
Doesn't matter.
then
We
you're
have a right to
trespassing.
be
It doesn't
here.
Then get a warrant. Go get a warrant.
You need a warrant.
Go get a warrant.
You're trespassing.
Yes, you do.
Come back with the warrant or
You
leave.
don't write the law.
So
The
you can
laws
walk
are
on any
written.
property with no warrant?
Go get a warrant. You guys are breaking the law right now. You're breaking the law. Go outside. No, go on your
They've
phone
been asked to
outside.
leave several
Go on your phone
occasions.
outside.
I would really like it if you
Where
would
did
stop
you hear the
shouting at me.
report
I haven't
from?
done
Okay, we
anything
would like it if you
wrong.
break the law. We would like
Where?
it if you break the law.
Who reported?
I'd really like it if you stop shouting at me. Give me a fucking break. Give me a fucking. I'd really like for you to stop. Well, they'd like it if you left their fucking property, okay? Or the property.
Go leave.
Who reported it? Who reported it?
You know what? I don't know.
Yeah,
Because
it's anonymous, right?
Yes,
It's
it
anonymous.
is.
It
But it's a
can't be
legitimate
anonymous.
complaint.
You need to
It
know
can
your
be,
accuser.
and
You need to
that's
know. It
not-
cannot
Okay,
be
wait,
anonymous.
you gotta go get a warrant.
It
That's not
cannot
how
be
health
anonymous.
departments
It
do
cannot
it.
be
You
anonymous.
gotta go get a
You
warrant.
don't get the
You gotta go
right
get a
to
warrant.
policies. You
It's
don't get to
code
violate the
enforcement.
Constitution. It
This
does
isn't
not
the
matter.
same
You
as
don't
that.
circumvent or subvert. the
This isn't the
Constitution.
same as
That's the way
that.
it works.
Call the news.
Okay, miss, you need to leave.
I want
Get out! 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 Get out!
No, now they gotta get off the property. We don't want them off the fucking property.
Dude, just because it's a Black Lives Matter
You guys aren't
protest,
welcome
turn your
here.
head.
You're not welcome here.
This is a Black Lives
You gotta
Matter
go. You guys
protest.
gotta
Turn
go
your
to the
head.
road. You gotta go to the road.
We will not comply. We will not comply. We will not comply. We will not comply.
This is
We
a
will not
protest.
comply.
This is a
We
protest,
will not
guys.
comply.
We do not
We
have to
will not
disband.
comply.
It is a
We will
protest.
not
This is
comply.
a lawful
We will not
protest.
comply.
We will not comply. We will not comply. We will not comply. We will not comply.
Walk them out. They
We
need to
will
leave.
not comply.
To the road. To the road.
Yeah, I love this guy. I love this dude. He's great. Taking compassion out to the parking lot. Ah.
Breaking the law.
Instead of torches and pitchforks, he got cell phones.
Who's on the phone? Adolf Hitler?
Who's oh, Adolf Hitler. Wait for it. Wait for it. Here it comes. Here it comes.
Take your commie shit elsewhere.
All right. I just had to play that again because it is brilliant. Now, here's the challenge with that. There's more. Okay, we got more. We got the California curfew going on here. Okay, so watch this. Watch this. You guys ready for this? Check this out. What do you think they're doing? Here we go. 1 minute after Gavin Newsom's.
All right, make a hole. Anybody in the back? Bring it forward. Burn it. Burn the mess. 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 Burn the mess.
There you go. So you got the left coast and you got. No, no. God, please, no Lee Greenwood. I know the song is well-meaning, but he's a fucking perv. He's a handler. He's a handler. I don't want to hear "God Bless USA" from some fucking handler. So you got left coast, right coast, east coast, west coast. The people in Western New York, those are tough people. They lost a lot of jobs due to China. There was manufacturing in Western New York, and they just went away. Those people had to deal with that shit. And the winters are very harsh. You don't fuck around with those people. They're not Upper West Side or Midtown people. They're just not. These are hard ass people. They're not even like New Rochelle people or Rochester people. These are badass people. And they sent those dudes packing. Now, I guarantee you that the county, the city, whatever, the state, they'll come back. They're not going to let that. They're not going to let that slide. So they're going to have to understand that and know that. And whoever that sheriff is, you guys let a foreign entity become sheriff of that city or that county, rather. You let a foreign entity. That guy's not from this country. And that's not to say that people that aren't from this country can't become sheriff, but in terms of locality and in terms of representing the community, they'd have to face some serious tests and criterion. Serious. So, and by the way, sheriffs are elected officials, and you should impeach that guy. You should recall that motherfucking sheriff, Buffalo, or wherever that is Buffalo, right? Recall him. Recall him. Okay. Western New York lost all their jobs. Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. That's when the outsourcing really started to happen. And it wasn't, China was just kind of a drop in the water at that time, but they were moving things to other places in other parts of the world. China was ultimately the destination. Like my father worked for a manufacturing company here in the States. He worked for a supplement company, and they manufactured cleaners and vitamins and supplements. And the union was too powerful, and they made too much money in California. So the first thing they did is they relocated the company to Tennessee, where there was no union. The wages were much lower. And that lasted for, 4 years or 5 years. And then they left. They said, fuck it, we're going outside the country. And I think they started to manufacture in Taiwan. And that was in 1979. So the outsourcing wave began in the mid-70s. And you're right, Western New York lost a lot of jobs, and it continued to quicken the pace. So those are for some very tough, hardened people that have gone through a lot, and they're going to hold on to whatever they have left. All bar attorneys and legislators are foreign agents who swear an oath and a guild and or foreign lobby group, APAC. Nathaniel, I'd like to talk to you more about that because I believe that to be true. And that's one of the things that people never really bring up in this whole discussion is the whole dual citizen thing, which I am not in favor of. I don't care what fucking country you belong to. A dual citizen should not be able to serve in any capacity in this country. No capacity whatsoever. If you hold dual citizenship, you should not be in office, whether it's local or whether it's state or whether it's a federal office. Sheriff's on our side. What did Uncle Glenn say? Let's see. Buffalo really suffered when Bethlehem Steel closed their plant. Most of the American steel plants closed. Most of them closed. Western Pennsylvania, there was a huge steel county or steel part of the country. And you know where a lot of the steel manufacturing went to Ukraine. Ukraine became a major producer of steel. I know that because an ex-family member owned a steel manufacturing company with somebody else in Ukraine. And that all changed pretty quickly. This country was gutted in the 70s. Yes. Finally hit bottom. Now Rona to preempt the imminent collapse. I don't know about to preempt the imminent collapse. I think it's here to accelerate the imminent collapse. But you're right, the country was gutted in the 1970s. And you had Paul Volcker with interest rates that were through the fucking roof. I mean, you go back to the 70s, it was very hard to get money. You wanted to start a business or you wanted to own multiple properties, the Federal Reserve and Paul Volcker under the guise of, well, we've got to, control inflation. And that was a big deal. That was a big thing. Europe had its own version. Europe had price protection and wage protection, and they put a cap on stuff in Europe. And this is what Enoch Powell was vehemently against. He was against wage control, and he was against price protection. And the government intervened and put a cap on everything. And as a result of that, there were crippling strikes in Europe during the mid 70s. You had coal people on strike. It was really, really bad. And so again, we see this at a global level. The same thing was happening in England was actually being instituted in the United States. And the United States was a bit better off because we had more infrastructure, we had more manufacturing, but getting that money, which would allow businesses to expand their production, was very difficult. We also saw the beginning of the Democrat takeover of major cities in the United States. That started to take place in the 60s, but it really accelerated during the 1970s. The most classic case, of course, being Coleman Young as mayor of Detroit, who ran Detroit right into the ground because he made it so difficult for the local businesses to stay open. And I'm not just talking about like GM or Ford or Chevy, but the ancillary businesses that would create the OEM products and all the add-ons and the additions that you could use in relationship to the major manufacturers of the automobile industry. They were in close proximity, and guess what? They were taken out. Just like it made it so difficult for them to continue to have their businesses in Detroit, they left. And even the manufacturing, the automobile industries who maintained a presence there began to outsource a lot of their manufacturing. In the 1970s, we start to see vehicles being made in Mexico. Now all of a sudden Ford is creating parts and even some vehicles in Mexico. And of course, we have the Japanese invasion during the 1970s with the automobiles, Japanese automobiles, Toyota, Nissan, and all that stuff, right? Which really threw a major wrench into the American economy with American-made cars. Not only that, but the outrageous emissions controls that were implemented on American cars, which at that time had not really been worked through and were really clunky and just, ripped the cars performance away. And on top of that, there was this mandate it was a soft mandate that, well, you had to get 30 miles per gallon with your car. So what do? You change the engine, right? You make the engine lighter. So instead of having an engine with a cast iron block, which will get you through just about anything, you have all these engines now being made with aluminum blocks, which meant that they would overheat, the heads would warp, and it would take the life expectancy of those cars like the Vega or the Pinto or all these, little pieces of shit that were put out there to compete with the Japanese cars, which got better mileage. You had a life expectancy of maybe 4 to 5 years with those cars, if you were lucky. If you're lucky, look around and see how many Vegas are on the road. You won't find any Zeros or Capris or any of those cars. They're gone. They're gone. So you had planned malfeasance inside the automobile industry. You had onerous emission controls with technology that was really not prepared to do it efficiently and lightly. You had the Americans set this idea of selling fuel economy by making a lesser car. The alloys on the cars themselves were changed. Like, look at the alloy on a car from 1967, like say a Ford LTD. That is metal. That is steel, right? You look at a Vega, what the fuck is that? It's like they're into these weird alloys which make the cars lighter. Everything goes to shit in the 70s in terms of that. So, well, guess what? Now we're just going to make this thing so crappy that everybody's going to want to buy a much more reliable and even affordable Japanese car. One of the reasons why foreign cars were so kind of in demand in a lot of ways, not Japanese, we're talking Fiats, Peugeots, Renaults, MGBs, Austin Healey's, Jaguars, you name it. One of the reasons why foreign cars were so popular during that time, we're talking about the 60s now, to some degree the 70s, is that they were status. If you had a foreign car, it was status. Well, why? It was because there were tariffs on that car. And they were not cheap, right? If you were to buy a Jaguar, it was a fucking expensive car. Or Mercedes-Benz was expensive, or Rolls-Royce was expensive. These were expensive cars because the tariffs were in place to protect the American automobile manufacturers. So yeah, people liked the foreign cars because they were status. They were status. The Japanese cars came in. There's no fucking status around the Japanese car. Oh, look at me. I'm driving a roller skate with an engine. It's called a Honda, right? There were no tariffs either. And it's funny because Trump was talking about this back in the 80s and how the Japanese and the Saudi Arabians were making all this money and we're not getting any of it. Right? That was one of his big platforms back then. So we can see to Christine's point that there was a time in the 70s where there was an implosion. There was a massive implosion in the 1970s. So it was really a depression, both from an economic standpoint. The purchasing power was down, the borrowing power was down, the manufacturing was beginning to, Americans were always known for solid products, solid manufacturing. You go back to the 60s, and there were some, weird clunker cars in the 60s. The Corvair was, not a great model, or the Edsel. But by and large, if you bought a car in the 1960s, that car was going to perform and would perform for a long time, and you could even do your own repairs. I used to own a 1963 Ford Falcon, easiest car ever to work on. Easiest, one of the best engines ever. Plenty of room under the hood. You could change the parts. You could do a bunch of stuff with that car. And then eventually that all went away. You did not have a lot of clunkers in the 1960s. Sure, there were some that were, really the clunkers were coming from Europe. You'd get the status, but, it was always in the shop. If you bought an Austin Healey, you had to always be tuning that thing. Same with the Fiat. I had a Fiat. When it was tuned up and it was in really good timing and condition, boy, it fucking ran like a champ. But if it got out of tune and something happened, it's very temperamental. So the 70s is a whole other shit show. And that's really, to your point, Christine, that's where things really begin to go downhill. And we have the whole thing with Nixon and Ford and Carter. And then Reagan comes along, and Reagan is sort of like Trump 1.0 in a lot of ways. And then we have the artificial inflation and recovery of the economy. And that's when they begin to sort of raid everything. They raid the savings and loans during the Reagan era. You know, the savings and loans were set up essentially to be plundered. Well, why? Because the savings and loans were given the ability to go out and do investments. Like they were taking your money and they were investing your money, and they're not supposed to do that. Oh, we'll give you 6.5% on your money. Well, how are we going to do it? Well, we're going to invest it. You're going to entrust your money to us. And so what did they do? They got into fucking junk bonds and penny stocks. Michael Milken, the junk bond king, was the Bernie Madoff of the 1970s and into the 80s. Well, it's the 80s, really. He's the Bernie Madoff of the 80s. You had Milken, you had Boesky. And Boesky was the guy that basically, you know, set up the arbitrages and the algorithms and greed is good and all that bullshit, right? And they all just dove in. Glendale Federal Savings, John McCain, you know who the players are. And the savings and loan, there were a lot of savings and loans gone. Because guess what? They removed the protections and they were allowed to invest in the market. Bad news, bad deal. People lost their fucking shirts. So there was some FDIC money involved. But let's say FDIC only covers, what, $150,000? What happened if you had $500,000 in a savings and loan? You get $150,000 back, which meant that all these other people skimmed off the top. And it wasn't quite the 70s, it's the 80s. And it's like, okay, we're going to deregulate. We're going to deregulate in the 80s. And, you know, we're going to try to get to this, you know, free market sort of ideal. We're going to go all Milton Friedman on shit. But it wasn't happen. It didn't happen. It wasn't a true free market. It was not a true free market. Now, a free market also doesn't believe in tariffs. And it's like, okay, well, let's open everything up, right? But that only works if you have a manufacturing base inside of your country to compete with the cheap goods coming in from other countries. But if your cheap goods are coming from other countries, you have a manufacturing base where there is no free market. It's an illusion. The market's been rigged, and that's what the globalists did. Oh yeah, we'll be free marketeers, and we'll extend it beyond the borders of the United States. Yeah, we're going to turn the free market into Walmart. And look what's happened. There we go. Whipping Post. Oh my God. Whipping Post, Allman Brothers Live. What a badass tune. That is a great song. I used to listen to that song over and over again. And the best part of that song is when it comes together at the end and just dun 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 dun. Oh Lord. The dollar stores. I know, man. The dollar stores are a fucking pox. You know, I go to the Dollar General here every now and then because I can find shit at the Dollar General. But the Dollar General is like the same fucking price as HEB. Like if I wanted, in fact, HEB is actually cheaper than the Dollar General. I went to go get, I was just poking around. I've got some oil in the Dollar General. And I was poking around. I'm like, oh, I could use some almond milk. So I went over to the refrigerated section, and to their credit, there's some almond milk, but it was more expensive than HEB. So why do I want to buy, you know, more expensive almond milk at the Dollar General than I want to get at HEB or can get at HEB? It's ridiculous. So the Dollar General isn't always your friend with prices. Just remember that. The free market was never free. It was always managed by secret. Yes, absolutely. It was a free market for select people. It wasn't a free market for everybody. Now, it wasn't. If it was a free market for everybody, we would have had a very, very different outcome. In the 1970s, where there were so many controls and so many measures placed upon not just Americans, but as I stated before, you know, the market caps, price control, everything that was happening in England during that time. And it was bad news. It was bad news. And this is what Enoch Powell talked about. He said, you know, you want to open this thing up, make it a real free market. This is a disaster waiting to happen. All of you live economically better. I'm not sure that's true. I challenge that. I would challenge that. I'm not sure we do live economically better. You know, my father and my father lived on a $10 an hour wage, was able to buy a house, right? You could theoretically at one point in time, you could buy a house by having a reasonable, simple job. Like if you were, let me give you a good example. Well, let's say you were somebody that had a retail job, okay? A retail job. Let's say you were an assistant manager in a retail store. You had that job, you could buy a house. There's no way really you could buy a house now with being an assistant manager in a retail store. It'd be very, very difficult. Very difficult. And Regina Meredith and I talked about that. Like you could live and have just a regular gig and you could afford to live and you could actually, get something reasonable and start to build equity, right? You weren't going to be able to have access to free money and start building a real estate empire like other people. No, we are not better off economically. It's not even close. Let's say you just graduated from college and you just spent $50,000 on a useless fucking degree and you can't get a job and now you're working, as a barista or demanding you get a $15 an hour wage. That is not economically better. I'm sorry. You can't make a case for that. We live 4 people, $100 a month. And where do you live? Where do you live? $400. Where do you live? I mean, let's be clear about that. You try to live 4 people, $100 a month here. You better be living in a place where you're off the grid and you're working the land, and you're scamming, welfare. Where do you live for that? Try to live it here. House ownership varies dramatically state to state. There was a time where it didn't. Okay, I'm just telling you, there was a time where it didn't. So yeah, it varies dramatically state to state. Of course it does. You want to get a place in Mississippi? No knock on Mississippi. Charles lives there. He loves it. But not everybody wants to live in fucking Mississippi. Okay, you want to get a house in I don't know, Death Valley. I'm sure you can get a really decent place in Death Valley. Who wants to live in Death Valley? Right? He's in Syria. Okay, you're in Syria. Well, you have 4 people living in a household for $100. What do you pay? Number one, what do you pay for a loaf of bread in Syria? Right? What do you pay for a loaf of bread in Syria? I would assume also, because Syria is an oil-producing country, and they are, by the way, that your social services and your social net is probably a little bit better than here, right? Probably a little bit better. I mean, clearly it was not so bad under Saddam Hussein, was it? The Iraqis had a pretty good life. They had a pretty good life. Wasn't so bad under Muammar Gaddafi either, was it? Pretty good life. I mean, if you live in Libya, you got some fucking perks. Yeah, you might be able to live $100, 4 people, $100 a month in Libya, but guess what? You were getting your tuition was taken care of. You can go to school in Libya. You can go to any school anywhere in the world. When you got married, you had a stipend from the state if you got married. So this is apples and oranges. This is apples and oranges. The Hilt Goat Burger Multi-Vibe. Apples and oranges. Let's see. But welcome. You might learn something. We might learn something from you. By the way, I'm glad that whatever's happened or has happened in Syria has at least abated in most of Syria. It's horrible what happened there. I was never, ever, ever a fan or supporter of that conflict, bar none. So you get points just for getting through that if indeed you live in Syria. No way I want to go back to writing a check to pay bills or giving up online shopping or what do I say? Or having to use a travel agent to get a flight. I mean, tech has helped us make us more productive. I actually like going to travel agencies. That was fun. But yeah, I agree. I mean, but that's a whole other industry that got gutted, right? And how many industries are going to get gutted by tech? And the only way you offset that is when you have really free energy. I mean, that's the only way you offset any of this stuff. So you have free energy, and then you have a 3D printer, and you know how to use a 3D printer, and you get the materials, and you basically create your own fucking world. Because that's how you compete at that point with all these other occupations being gutted. Writing the check to go to the store, whatever. It's not a big deal. I don't give a shit. And then in terms of what else did you say? Shopping online, I don't mind going to stores. I never minded going to stores. I like going to record stores. I like going to bookstores. I like running into people, getting to know people, talking about albums, talking about books. You know, you would have some form of contact. I think there's a place for the online stuff, especially if you live in a remote area. I think it's really good. It's the nearest Sears and fucking Roebuck catalog. There's nothing wrong with that. But again, there has to be some balance. And they've removed pretty much all the physical places where you could go and actually have contact with another human. Right? You could go to a record store to be other people going through the bins, and you see what they were, the thing I always hated is like somebody in the bin and getting a record that you would look at and pulled out. It's like, you son of a bitch, right? But those are interesting points of contact. Oh shit, I gotta go. I got a chiropractic appointment. Yeah, I'm an introvert, but I love going to my local stores. Yeah, I like going to the stores too. I've always liked going to the stores. And I hated to go shopping with the occasional woman in my life who was really into it. I'm going to leave you some links here. I kind of went off on a bit of a rant today, but I'm going to put some links in the show page. And let me throw this in here so you guys can grab it because I can do it. We've got pandemic is over. Former Pfizer chief science officer said second wave faked on false positive COVID test. Be informed, people. Be informed. I'm going to throw this in here. There you go. I'll put it in the show page. Bang on that. Grab that link. You may want to copy it. You may want to take a screenshot before that gets taken down from wherever it goes. Let's see. We've got something interesting happening here. Ohio House approves bill limiting DeWine action on health quarantines. That's happening now. I'm throwing that here. I was going to talk about these things. I got on a bit of a roll today. What else do I want to put in there? Let's see. Anything else? I think that's it. I think those are the things I really wanted to cover because there was a lot more going on that I wanted to support in terms of what I was talking about today. Okay. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. I'll put a link in the show page if you would like to support the show. And I really appreciate you guys showing up and being here every day. And for me, it's a great kind of dharmic point and a gathering where we can all get together, myself included, and throw this stuff against the wall. And you may not agree with me, and that's okay. You can completely disagree with me. I may not always agree with you, but alternative points of view are welcome. And if I think they're valid, I will certainly give them their props. If I don't, then I'll chime in the other direction. Okay? All right. Use your head in order to discern what's real. Your heart says what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. Bye for now. We'll be back here tomorrow. And then just to remind you, on Friday, I will have a Friday show, even though it is Thanksgiving. I'm going to have a Friday show. Sherry Swiney will be on the show. And we're going to talk about the voices in your head and how to get them the fuck out. All right. Take good care. Have a great day.